Right, welcome back everybody to another episode. We've got a special guest this week, and we met in person a few weeks ago, so it feels like really lovely to have taken something virtual into the real life. Welcome, it's a pleasure to have you. So this is Claire. Claire, when did we first meet online? Is that a little while ago now?
Probably properly with your Tutor to Thrive course, which was what, June, July?
Is that in June? Oh, the June. So this year,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we've
So I've
worked
been in
together.
it for a while.
Yeah, so we've worked together a little bit, and just stayed in touch since, of messaging, and just generally been in each other's worlds actually now, because I've done some work with you, or you've done some work with me actually quite recently, which we'll definitely talk about at some point, because that's really important. Really, you're here so that we can talk about all sorts of different things, but it's got a couple, two separate themes. One is your journey away from teaching into tutoring, and then we're going to talk about EFT, and you're going to explain a little bit more about that. And I'd love to share my experience of this as well, because it was
Awesome.
like transformational. So welcome. Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do now, and then just tell us about your journey away from teaching into tutoring.
I hate that question. Tell me about yourself.
I know,
And actually,
sorry.
I think that's probably quite a common thing within teachers. Like some of the learning I've done since, it's about that losing who you are and what is it to be you. So, triggering question. Thanks, Richard.
That's fine. I think.
Okay, about me. So, I am Claire. I live in the south of England and pretty much always have. I thought about teaching on and off since I was literally a student at school, but even then was put off by the whole red tape, bureaucracy, don't want to get involved in that. Had quite an emotional moment with my brother recently because he was not as academically able as I was, so struggled in mainstream school, probably undiagnosed dyslexia, possibly ADHD as well. But he went on to do mechanics at college and needed help with the math side of it. So I helped him, and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I can help my brother, who I have obviously a volatile relationship with anyway, to do maths and to learn, I can help anyone. And the emotional part of that is very recently, he told me that I was the first person that made him feel like he wasn't stupid. So thanks, bro. But that was quite a big step. And yet I still tried to stay away from teaching for several years.
Okay.
Helped a bit by the fact that I fell pregnant before I left college and went down the mum route first instead. And at the age of 25, everything kind of came crashing down around me. And I went, you know what? I've got nothing else to lose. Let's do it. So at
Claire,
25,
Claire, when you say everything
sorry.
came crashing down, is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, mostly it was probably a relationship breakup.
Okay.
Because of having been a very young mum, I was in social housing. So I couldn't have lost my home. My relationship was already gone. I was probably at that point in time, the lowest point in my life. Again, questioning what I was doing work-wise. And yeah, had a conversation with someone, and went, do you know what, I'm just going to do it.
What were you
Because
doing work-wise at that point?
I was doing bookkeeping and payroll at the time
Okay.
for a firm of accountants. And I would always have that. I still always have that to fall back on, which is quite a nice, privileged position to be in. So yeah,
Yeah.
so at 25, I went to uni. I was at the time mum of a 6-year-old. Very grateful to my mum for all the help and support she gave looking after her at the same time as doing my studies. And yeah, it's the only time we had a conversation recently. It's the only time I've ever really had a goal was to finish my 3 years of uni because I didn't already have a degree, and teach for at least a year to find out if it was what I wanted. And I loved it. I love teaching. I love sharing the knowledge that I have. So I'm maths secondary. So interesting bit there as well. So I knew I wanted to do secondary, but the not having a degree already, the quickest way to train was to do a Key Stage 2-3 course with the education, like the QTS in it. So it was a 3-year degree, studying at Key Stage 2-3, but knowing full well I wanted to do that GCSE level of maths. Ended up working back at my own secondary school, which was a bit strange, meeting some of my old teachers in the corridor on interview. And one of my PE teachers ended up as my head of department. So again, also a weird position because I hated PE at school. And I was very happy there for, well, quite a while. I can't even remember how long. I should be able to do the maths, but I can never do the maths on this for some reason. And then I think I was starting to have concerns it wasn't right for me anymore, probably at the end of the academic year 2013. And that must have been when our lovely Mr. Gove was the education secretary and
No
thought he knew
comment.
what he was doing.
Yeah.
So the changes anticipated there, I was not happy about. It felt like it wasn't going to fit what I believed anymore. And then the school I was at also became a academy school. And literally the first inset day back in September 2013, they said something and I literally felt the nail go in the coffin lid. I was like, I can't do
Really?
this anymore. It was talking about it being a business, and it can't be. The
Mm.
education of the future of our country cannot be about making money. It has to be about so much more than that. And it just feels that with the changes that were happening at that time, that it's become very much like there's so many academies now, and it's become a financial institution, and that's not what it should be at all. So yeah, the easiest way to describe why I left teaching is that it no longer fits my moral compass. I just don't believe in what we're doing in mainstream education anymore. And at that point in my life, I was really confident, so I knew I needed to leave. I remember the conversation with the deputy head about the fact that I needed to go, and bawling my eyes out afterwards, because it was still a really hard thing to do. I loved it there. I loved my colleagues. I loved the kids, but I don't love the system. So in 2014, I left to get bungee corded back within a year.
So what did you do in between?
So I got laughed out of a recruitment agency. So obviously, with my background in bookkeeping and payroll, that was an obvious sort of
Yeah.
alternative. Went into a recruitment agency to say what I wanted, job and finances wise, and pretty much got laughed out. And I was very annoyed about that. And to the point that I thought about setting up a recruitment agency for teachers, led by teachers, because only we can understand the skills that we have through being a teacher, because it's so misunderstood outside of schools. But not my skill set at all. So left that one. Ended up at, again, weirdly, a local college, but a college for disabled children and those with SEND needs, quite severe needs, doing payroll. And I was bored. I was bored senseless. I think my brain is so on fire that I was getting the job done like in way less time than they anticipated the role being. So then I was sat there twiddling my thumbs. They also, because of how they work, had very little to do over the summer holidays. And it just, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then my previous HOD messaged me to say, the person that's replaced you, her mum's really poorly. Can you come back in and do a bit of cover? Oh, no, actually, that might have been previous to that. And then they left. So they wanted to climb the pastoral ladder, which wasn't going to be an option there. They left and they couldn't get anyone. And again, I think because it was my previous secondary school, it held such a positive, loving place in my heart. I couldn't let them struggle and suffer. So I went back initially on a contract. So at the point at which you find someone, or I'm done, I literally just go. So none of this faffing around with like half a term's notice or anything. And then he would have still been my boyfriend at the time, and I was starting to talk about having a baby, or moving house. So we thought actually it would be better to be employed. And I think actually part of the pullback as well is just that golden handcuffs. You feel like you're not going to make the same money without losing things like the holiday or the apparent timescale. I think a lot of us, although we know it's so false, we still buy into that shorter working day, that you finished at 3 so you can pick your kids up. But so my eldest, because of how much effort and energy I put into my teaching career and doing the best work I could for the benefit of other people's children, basically meant I neglected my own daughter. And I think even before I left the first time, she had started self-harming, which was obviously a massive blow and a kick to having to do things differently, which I think I did successfully at the time. there's always going to be flaws. There always is. As a parent, it doesn't matter how hard you try, how much
Mm,
knowledge you have, there are still always going to be things that you get wrong.
mm,
But I got that really, really wrong with her. Really wrong, and I didn't realize until it was too late.
mm,
So having had baby number 2 with a 20-year age gap and going back again, there was already, I suppose, quite a strong desire, need not to ever end up in that same position. And when I went back after maternity leave, they actually transferred me from maths to computer science, which initially was absolutely amazing because it was plan a lesson, teach it to everyone in year 7.
yeah.
Plan a second lesson, teach it to everyone in year 8.
Mm,
And just the reduced pressure by not being a core subject. And oh, it was just so freeing. I would literally leave pretty much at the end of the day, almost with the kids, go and get my son and do the mum thing. But it still wasn't right. I think obviously COVID happened as well, while I was a computer science teacher. And I didn't realise how many anxieties of my own I had going
mm,
back into the classroom after that. I think a lot of schools may have mishandled, for want of a better word, because I don't want to offend anyone. But I think not enough consideration was made for the impact that COVID had on things other than education. So obviously the anxiety, not just of the kids, but of teachers. I think there's been a massive growth in that and the concerns that people have going back into the classroom after all of that happened. I was also probably suffering with postnatal depression that I didn't fully realise until, again, probably a bit too late. Not being my subject area meant that when a year 9 class got put in, and I did go and do an accelerated thing as well, but when they started talking about buses and stuff, I was just like, not only do I not understand what you're talking about, it's not my subject area and I have no desire to learn it. And I applied for another role that was a potential sidestep into primary, or like that lower end, because obviously my training was there, that it had always been a possibility. And by the time I went to interview, it was like, if I don't get this job, I'm done. I need to just go. And
mm.
thankfully, by now my husband was really supportive of the fact that he could see how much I was struggling, and he was like, yeah, go. So I left again.
I mean, we were talking just before about how the flow of this podcast might go and the story. And you're saying, oh, should we talk about that journey away from teaching the first time and the second time? And I think it was really important that you did share that, because there'll be so many, like even full-time teachers now who might be listening to this thinking, oh, I just feel the same way. Like there's like you say, the moral compass, something's not quite fitting. And take it from those who have done this, the pull back to the classroom is strong and it will remain there. I've been out of the classroom for 6, maybe, and this might be the 7th year. I still, if my school, I'm the same as you, but I actually tutor in the primary school that I went to. And the only reason I do that is because it's the primary school I went to. I don't need to do it. I love doing it. But if they said to me, Rich, we need cover tomorrow, you come and do this. Someone's off for 2 weeks, we come and do it. In my mind, my heart would go on, you'd love that.
Yeah.
But my brain is like, you don't have time. No, this isn't right for you. You know what's going to happen. They're going to get you in there from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m, because that's what you're going to have to do just to keep up with the workload and to make yourself feel like you're doing a good job, because that is what it takes, to do it in that scenario. And that's at primary school. And I know at secondary school, the targets are, I think the pressure's the same in both. Having worked in primary school, I've never
Oh,
worked in
absolutely.
secondary. I think the pressure's, but I hear what's coming out of secondary school. So I try to empathize with that in the same way, because it's not something I've lived. But yeah, I can hear you. But everybody who's listening, you're going to get, and you're thinking you're leaving, or perhaps you already have, and you'll be nodding along going, yeah, I get that pull back to the classroom. Because what we romanticize in our head is the 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock, working with the children, making the life changing lessons and the light bulb moments. And, I don't know, the things that we absolutely love about it.
Connection that comes as well through being in a school. I know for me, it was only talking to one of the still math department colleagues in the first or second year She mentioned something about you only do year 7 and 8. She was like, oh, I could not cope without seeing my year 11s because it's just such a different level of conversation and interaction that you can have. And in that moment, I realised why I hung around at the childminders picking up my son so long, because she was the only adult that I spoke to all day. And
Mm,
that is something that's really easy to miss
mm,
if you're not in. So for me, I'm mostly tutoring now. I'm still not in that environment where I have adult contact regularly, and I do
mm,
miss it. So that for me will always be one of the things that sort of tries to pull me back. And obviously you think the money's going to be good, and I did supply for a while, and mixed degrees of sort of success or not there. But especially as a secondary maths teacher, your hand is being bitten off by people. You say, I'm only available to do 2 days a week, and they're like, oh, actually, can you do 8 weeks of cover full time? Oh
mm.
yeah, go on then, because I know then I'm going to have the money that I need. And with that, you're sucked back in again, and then, oh, you sure you don't want a permanent job, and things like that. And it can be really tough. And
It's
even if you do
easy.
manage to stand firm on that 2 days, just because the staff know you're a maths teacher in this maths classroom, the kids don't care. They're like, yes, got cover today, no need to do any work.
It's just easy to slip back in, isn't it? Like it,
Really is.
yeah, like it is. I get what you mean. It's a tough situation, but like you said, I was chatting to a tutor that I've got coming in and working with me over, and he's only been here about 5 weeks. But we had this conversation yesterday, and he was saying, like, the work I've given him now is everything I can give him. Unless something magical happens and it grows and massively within the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, this is what it's going to be like until at least December. And he's like, there's other things he needs to do. He needs to go and do supply and that stuff. And I was like, just go and do what you need to do. We'll make it work. But I'm scared of doing supply because of what you just said, because it will start with, can you just do a day? Right, I mean, 2 days next week. Oh, do you know what? Actually, we could do with you, because especially when you're good at what you do, they'll try and
Yeah,
grab you. And look, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's really like a level of pride in what you deliver in the classroom because we're professionals,
absolutely.
of course. But with that comes that fear. So the tough bit is being boundaried and going, no,
Yeah,
first of all, like, this is what I'm worth, because he told me what he was offered. And I was like, well, first of all, go back and ask for more, because that's a
yeah.
definite no. And then be boundaries. When I only do 1 day a week, and I only work in this thing because he's primary, and they was offering year 11 science, I think. I was like, well, how's that going to work?
Shows how much they try and take the mickey, right? Because of how awful a situation things
Yeah,
are.
because schools are on their knees in certain departments, so they're just going, right, you're qualified. If you're a qualified teacher, you are technically qualified to teach.
Anything,
However, like,
whether you
we should
care
have
or
our,
not.
yeah, but we should have our own professional boundaries as well, shouldn't we? And go, actually, I'm
Absolutely.
not a science teacher. He's like, and he said, I've told you, I am primary school. Stop offering me GCSE stuff. So, there are boundaries out there, but it's just interesting to hear like your journey with the push and pull and that moral compass, which I think we all feel that.
I've been invited back again, and I was like, nah, you're all right. And they went, you'll be amazing. I was like, you might think so, but I wouldn't be. Like, if I hadn't have left when I did, I'm pretty sure I would have been heading towards a nervous breakdown by Christmas.
Yeah, like, yeah, and there'll be people who think that's a joke, but actually,
Oh no, I'm not
that
joking. I'm
that
serious. And that's not because of what was going on in school. My school have always been, for the most part, incredibly supportive. I've been very, very lucky
mm,
not to work in what a lot of people have to in terms of toxic environments or anything. I've
mm,
always felt very well supported. I don't necessarily always agree with what some of the higher up the ladder people do,
yeah.
which because of the impact that that has on you as a classroom teacher and on the ground level. But I still, my own life as well. Like I say, postnatal depression, family difficulties. We all have all these other things going on. And actually, if I'd have just tried to carry on pushing, I would have been. Well, I don't know where I would have been.
So there's another theme that came out of this, and I'd love to explore this with you a little bit, because you said something which I've been saying often over the last, how old am I now? 41. So let's say 11, nearly 12 years, which is, I feel that in the teaching profession, we pour everything into other people's children
Absolutely.
and and neglect our own.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think we start out with that intention.
No way.
but our passion for education ends up overtaking everything else. That's the first angle. But I think the second angle is we almost get brainwashed into it. And it's almost like a coercion, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of guilt and shame attached to teachers in that, we get criticized often, and I mean within our environment as well. Like, people, and I don't mean like it. Sometimes it's what we call critical analysis, which is fine, but often it's the little put downs, or like, because I'll give you a bit of context. Like you were saying, when you was doing your computer science job or the teaching, like you could almost leave at the same time as the children, but there'll be other people around you in different departments that would be like, see, Claire left at 4:45. And they're there till 6:30, because that's what their subject needs them to do, and their job would need them to do. And so sometimes it's like the little things that happen around you end up coercing you in. And that whole like, oh, I did 60 hours last week. Oh, I did 60 and a half. Oh, I did 61 hours. It ends up being like this competitive, like, who's the most tired? Who's working on?
Busy.
Yeah, and so you end up kind of just being almost like pulled into that, and then we turn away from the things that actually matter. And like, it sounds like there was an extreme consequence for that in your family. Now, let's shine a positive light on this. Like, first of all, none of us are perfect, and there will always be things happening that, I mean, I completely regret, to the point where I still get emotional about it. This thing, I missed nativities, I missed sports club, like sports meets for kids. I've missed like the yearly assemblies, everything, because I was busy making my own classes assemblies and making sure the kids in my class knew I was there and available. But
and you don't even, you'll feel crap about it at the time, but you still don't really realize what's going on.
it
And
upsets
I think
me,
the longer
Claire.
term impact that it has.
Oh, this is the thing that, and I've forgiven myself now, because look, it's gone. There's no way I can keep looking back. But the thing I come back to, particularly with my youngest, is my son. The time when he was in reception and he would have looked up from the stage, I weren't there.
Yeah.
That's like fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Also, I can, all because I can look after 30 other people's children. And don't get me wrong, I've just a privilege, and I loved being part of those children's lives. I loved it, but I would have liked to have been part of my own children's lives as well, a little bit more,
Absolutely.
And the only thing we can do is like start that from a certain point, and that's a real big drive for me to be around more. And and so when they do look up, they see me now. You know what I mean? That's the thing. So it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is tough.
Yeah.
And how is your daughter now?
Mental health and difficulties with it are always going to be a challenge for her, which is obviously quite common nowadays for everyone. But generally, she is well. She doesn't hurt herself in that same way anymore. Smoking, I think, is probably her chosen form of self-harm these days, and the mental beating herself up. But she's in a much better position than obviously whatever was going on back then. I took the wake-up call. I took the wake-up call, and I started making sure I spent more time with her. And I think it's really important to say, for anyone listening that might be concerned as well, it's surprising that it doesn't have to be very long to make a difference. So with her, what we started doing was just card games. We'd have card games, because I felt that I could cope with the 10 minutes of a card game to have that interaction and bonding time with her, the quality time that she needed. It felt manageable for me while giving her what she needed. So it was that compromise between the work bit that's over here and actually the child bit that really, really needs me right now.
Bless you.
You'll be surprised that it doesn't have to be hours and hours of time to make a huge, huge difference.
There's a couple of guys who I used to work with, I'm still quite close with. And we had Herbie, my youngest, was born the same time as his youngest, his little girl. And so a couple of years into teaching, we had conversations a lot about how are we coping at home. And because it was just all consuming, and like often and with young children as well, like you get home, you don't have anything left.
I think one of the mistakes I made in going back after maternity leave was not allowing any time for myself between the school day and picking my son up. I would literally finish school, and get to the childminders just in
Yeah.
time to pick him up. And then, of course, you're on mum duty.
Mm.
And if you're teaching, usually kids go to bed, you carry on working. There was no, for me to
Yeah.
be me, but also
Mm.
to let go of the stresses and strains from my work day. And they were still having an impact on my son. As much as I felt like I wasn't carrying those things home, it's only the hindsight that's enabled me to see that actually I wasn't being the best mum to him as much as I
Mm.
thought I was, because I was picking him up and I was I was doing dinner, I was doing bedtime and all the rest of
Mm.
it. So ticking the boxes, if you like, but he wasn't getting the best version of me
Mm.
because I hadn't taken that time for myself. Even just 10 minutes sitting in the car would
Mm.
have made a huge difference, and I didn't do it.
Mm.
And I think that's, as much as that has an impact on him, it's also about that looking after ourselves. And obviously self-care gets thrown around loads, and it's so easy to think that that's bubble baths and nights out with the girls or face masks or all of those like really pampering things. But some of the stuff I've done since, the best way someone worded it was that, not that self-care is not selfish, I absolutely agree with that, but that wasn't how they worded it. It's that self-care is absolutely necessary for the healthy functioning of you and everyone you have a relationship with. And they described it as self-care are the things that you do that feed your soul. And if
Mm.
you don't know what they are, think about what you loved to do as a kid.
Mm.
Because when you're a kid, you don't have any of those concerns. You do just what makes you feel good.
Mm. That's
And that was
powerful.
huge for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. Yeah. So let's just take a second. I'm going to think about what that actually means. And anybody listening or watching, just take a second and think about what that is.
Yeah. I'm actually going to do the whole close my eyes and put my hands on my heart, because just taking that pause.
Mm. Okay.
And that kind of comes back to why I find it so hard to answer that question. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah. 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 It's
Because
deep.
it's so easy
Yeah,
to
it is.
forget.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember going back a long, long before I was a teacher. I used to work for. I did a number of jobs. But this was social services and early intervention. So I used to run parental groups where we'd talk about parenting, and some of this stuff used to come up. And I remember the school I worked at. We had an agreement, and any service we went out and did with a school, it always had to have a member of staff present. And the reason for that was about building sustainability, building connections and community, and all those kind of things, which at the time I was like, oh, building community. Now I think it's like, because that was embedded in my early career, that's something which I really hold dear now. But at the time I was still learning about it. Anyway, there was one week where no member of staff could attend apart from the head teacher, who was adamant she couldn't. And I was like, well, we're not. And I was there. I was like, well, I'm not allowed to actually deliver the session. You've got all the parents waiting. And the head teacher was like literally in a huff coming in. And she did it. She sat down and we spoke about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And we had so many amazing conversations that day. I actually still think that's probably, out of that job, the highlight. I don't think I'll ever forget that sort of 40 minutes, because it was so connected, and we were talking about things that would made so much of a difference. There was people talking about, this one time where they ignored their kid crying because there was an ambulance in the street and they was caring for their neighbor, and they feel bad because we were talking about, like, making sure you attend to your child's needs at the lowest level. And I was like, yeah, but I was talking about, yeah, but like always, like it's always something you could beat yourself up about, but look at what you
Absolutely.
did. And also, like, you can't attend to every single need every single second of the day, because your child will learn no resilience and grit and determination, or even that kind of self. I think from a younger child, not maybe a small baby, but a bit an older one, maybe going towards toddlerhood, like even self-regulation, and actually I am safe and I am okay and I can, like, start to regulate, even if it's for a short amount of time. Obviously, don't leave your kids crying for hours and hours. But at the end of that session, the head teacher came up to me and said, I can't believe we're talking to these parents, because it was in a deprived area, talking to these parents about Maslow. And I'm like, well, why the hell
Why
wouldn't
not?
we? Why
Yeah.
wouldn't we say that
Why
these are the
not?
basic needs? This is why when your child comes home from school, they're giving you grief.
Yeah.
They were giving them explanations. So rather than like giving them a clip round the head and send them to their room, now they can be more understanding. Now they're going to do the parenting side of what their
Yeah.
parents didn't do because they didn't know about it. We're breaking cycles. And so what I when you were talking about like your son then and not having the time in between, in my mind I just picture Maslow. I was like, look, actually what you're doing is making sure at the heart of everything those needs are met, because that's what keeps
Yeah.
your son safe. And I know at the heart of it, like, you need to take time for yourself and self-care, and now everybody knows about it. Now we can build in time for it. But sometimes when you're in
Absolutely.
the midst of parenting and working, there's not a lot
Totally
of
putting it
them.
out there right now. Parenting is hard. It is
Yeah,
having raised. I'm in a very obviously unique position that I have raised one of my children to full-grown adulthood. I'm
yeah.
actually a granny as well now, so I've seen the impact of what I did as a parent with her all the way through. And there were times where I was like, parenting's easy, teaching's the hardest job in the world. And something would happen like that. And I'd be like, hell no, parenting.
Mm,
And now, no question at all, parenting is the hardest
mm,
job you will ever do. Partly
mm,
because it's ongoing. But I also want to put it out there, we don't say that enough.
mm,
We do not share enough how hard it
mm.
is. And we
Agreed.
need to do that more because
Yeah,
that's one of
agreed.
the ways we can protect ourselves and our families.
Yeah, agreed to that. 100%. Yeah, definitely. And I could get on a soapbox now about a lot of that parental stuff got taken away when we had the financial crisis and we had a new government put in and they needed to save money, or did they need to save money? It took away a lot of vital
Yeah.
services at what I call the low level end, and
The
it stopped
interventions.
access to some of this stuff, which is a massive shame. We're all going to come back
Yeah,
to it within the next 5 or 6 years because that's the cycle,
totally.
which I can't wait for. And I feel like it's just almost my girls are older. One's 21, one's 19, but they're getting to the point where they're not getting to the point. Like, I really hope I'm not going to be a granddad yet. Like, you look too young. What do your what does your is it a granddaughter or grandson?
I've got a granddaughter.
So what does your granddaughter call you?
Grampy. There's a whole story about my
Okay,
grandparent name.
all right.
Whole
We'll
story. We
save
don't need
that.
to
We'll
go into
save that.
that,
It's
but
funny.
I'm
So
Grampy.
I just had a similar conversation with someone here in the office. We was just talking about children and stuff. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm a grandmother now." And I was like, "Oh, what do they call you?" Because I feel like we all have these different things. When I was growing up, my nan and granddad on both sides was just nan and granddad. So we
Yeah,
didn't have. But my nephew calls his other, not my dad, obviously he's my brother's father-in-law, pops, and I really like
yeah.
that.
I love that.
I really like that because, and also I like that it's different, so that it's those pops
Yes.
and granddad, so we know who we're talking about. Anyway,
Well, that's
anyway,
part of the story because I've got a 4-year-old that's already got a nan, a nana, and a nanny. I was like, I'm not being an N, but my daughter wouldn't let me be granny. She didn't like granny. It makes you sound old. And I'm like, well, compared to how I am, so I don't see the problem there. But yeah, so I've ended up as Grampy.
okay,
We're
all
all
right,
happy with
that's
that.
pretty cool. I like it. Okay, let's move on because there's other stuff we want to
Absolutely.
share, and I want to share my experience with this. And I think it became, or you made it known during the course that we did back in June, that the EFT was something that you're studying, but you're passionate about, and it's transformational, and it's something which I have known about in the past because I know other people have done it, and I know another practitioner, but I didn't really know what it was until super recently, the last week or so. And tell us a little bit about your discovery of EFT. Tell us about what it
Okay.
actually is. There'll be lots of people who haven't heard of it yet.
Okay, I feel like there needs to be a proviso here. So I've started introducing it to some of the kids that I work with, and I get, Miss, are you really spiritual? And I'm like, absolutely. There is a bit of a witch in me that's coming out more and more. I don't
Okay.
say that as a bad thing. I see it as a very, very positive thing. Um, but EFT is nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So I just feel I need to put that out there. It seems a bit woo-woo when you first come across it, but you
Mm.
don't need to have any witchiness, otherworldly things, or anything to understand it, use it, or have it work. So now that I've done that bit, um, So how did I come across EFT? A very well-timed, well-placed Facebook advert that advertised something called the tapping solution, which was about basically there's a family called the Ortners, a sister and two brothers that have created this app called the tapping solution, whereby you can go on there and tap along to an automated script and feel better about almost anything. Like, I couldn't even tell you how many scripts they've now got on their app, but it's just amazing. So I came across that in April 2020. So actually during lockdown.
Mm.
And I think around the time I was reading a book called The Urban Monk, who suggests if you want to change anything in your life, you should try and do a gong. A gong being doing that thing 100 days in a row, because if you can do it 100 days in a row, you've pretty much got a habit. So I decided that tapping was going to be my gong. My brain seems to operate a bit funny because once I hit a target, I'm like, I'm done, I'm good. So I did my 100 days and I had a day off, and then I haven't ever used the app regularly since, which is a shame in some ways. However, it does mean I'm now aware of EFT, which is also known as tapping, because that's literally what you do. So going back into school, obviously I was aware of it. Probably would have been the thing I should have done, sat in my car for 10 minutes between leaving school and collecting my child, but didn't do that enough. But there's always those kids that they're not going in the classroom. There's always kids milling around the corridor. Oh no, I can't go in there. Anxiety, or I can't go in there. My teacher hates me. And I just felt that I was seeing more of that as I was leaving, and realizing that actually, if I could share EFT in schools, it would change everything. And I mean everything. It would benefit schools, it would benefit individuals, it would just, like you said, be transformational. So I put in one of the Facebook groups related to tapping about wanting to do this, and somebody pointed out that because of how it works, it is safe. But it was one person's opinion. Everyone else was like, yeah, do it. And since then, there's so many people that just do it. But it really got to me that because it can unlock childhood events that may be quite traumatic, you must know how to keep people safe. So when the opportunity arose, must have been last April, to certify, I went for it. It was one of those, couldn't necessarily afford it, but found a way to make it work because it was important to me. And yeah, so I started my certification, which has been, I love reading, but jeepers, it has been a challenge doing all the reading. There is so much science and research behind it. I'm now certified. I am a certified clinical EFT practitioner. And the clinical part is about the fact that the guy I have trained with turned it into a handbook so that anyone doing research does it exactly the same way. Because of that, and because of the amount of research that has been done, EFT, clinical EFT, is now recognised by the APA and the AMA, which is the American Psychological Association and the American Medical Association, which is huge. It basically means that doctors, nurses, psychologists can do training in EFT and use it as part of their CPD. And I feel that's important to say because anyone can tap, everyone can tap. There's varying levels of degree, but the only reason they've been able to research and sort of prove the results of tapping is because of this clinical manual for doing it. So making sure that everyone's following the same process. If people are aware of it, they may already have some experience, but it may be very different. So I know that at the Tutors Conference, run by Sharon and Sarah, there was somebody there doing some EFT, but somebody had seen one of the videos I've done and shared recently and gone, I felt like she was doing it wrong. She didn't do it the same way as you. And that's absolutely okay. Not everyone's going to do it the same way, but the research is based on everyone doing it the same way. It has to be, because otherwise it wouldn't be medically sound, I suppose. But because of that, some of the biggest research has been done with war veterans in the US. So obviously massive levels of PTSD, which impacts the families as well. And through, I should have checked this. I think it was something like a 6-week course or it might have been 6 hours. I can't remember the exact details, but basically the EFT universe, who I trained with, have done some research taking families and the war veterans, assessing them for PTSD at the start, teaching them how to do tapping and tapping with them, and obviously then assessing them again at the end.
Mm.
After the course of EFT, they can no longer diagnose PTSD. They literally do not hit the markers anymore for having a diagnosis of PTSD,
Wow.
which is obviously incredible. Alongside that, so most people are familiar with CBT, the
Mm.
cognitive behavioral therapy. So there was like control groups obviously doing that. CBT is effective in the short term, but it didn't have the long-term effects, whereas EFT and EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and regulation, they both had very similar effects that also lasted longer. And the reason for that is because when something happens to us, especially those negative experiences, they are stored within our body.
Mm.
So we know that memory is in the brain, but actually everything's stored in the body as well. And when you get triggered, it doesn't matter what you rationally believe, it's because of how past experiences that look similar to your brain have been held in your body. And EFT basically unlocks those, moves them on so that the same thing no longer triggers you in the same way.
Mm. So let's share what happened, and I won't go into the depths, but I can share my transformation with people with this. I was at the conference and did the EFT thing there, and actually that was quite similar to what we did in terms of the routine. I'm going to imagine it's about the routine, right? Like the tapping on the
Not
hands.
so much, actually.
So is
No,
it the words?
it's all of it. So
Okay.
EFT combines exposure therapy, I think some of the CBT stuff, and also the reason it's called tapping is you're tapping on acupressure points,
Yeah.
which come from acupuncture, which
Yeah.
is obviously ancient, like
Yeah.
the ancient art of Chinese medicine combined
Yeah.
with the modern psychology. And it's all about calling to mind something that's uncomfortable while
Mm.
sending a calming signal to the brain, basically dissolves, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
the connection within the brain.
Yeah. So the neuroscience behind this is that connections form in the brain, and if that connection is traveled down regularly or often enough, it becomes a permanent fixture. It actually gets layered
Exactly
with
that.
fat, and so that connection becomes what we call hardwired. So we have hardwiring all around the brain. So this is about looking at how you rewire or start to unlearn things and unconnect.
Effectively, yeah.
Or reframe, because that's what I
Yes.
found with our session was
Yeah.
this reframing. And actually a lot of what I've done talking therapy before, which I find very useful because I think getting it out there and acknowledging, but then having someone reframe it and help you reframe is part of that process that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. And I found there was elements of that within, but there was something a bit more powerful about what we did. And emotional, right? So because we were talking about when we was doing our session, like how on the edge I'd been on that emotional thing. It was kind of just sat there the whole time, and everything was setting me off. And you took me back through, like, so what if I explain what happened at the start? We just had a conversation around, look, what is it that we need to explore? And you just probed and went a bit deeper, and then went a bit deeper again, and we spoke about feelings, we spoke about smells, we spoke about even feelings within the body, and we're talking about a memory that was when I was sort of 9 years old, which I'd say even a week before wasn't even aware of, that it was something that was bothering me, right? So it's something else that happened, and then I took it to you and we worked through it. Now through the affirmations, I'm going to call them, but I don't know if they are affirmations. It's kind of like I was trying to explain it to someone else,
Might
Claire,
not
and I
be.
was like, it's a bit like chanting. It's not chanting because we're not like in a circle chanting, but it's like you come up with a script that is related to what we've spoken about,
Yeah.
and then it's almost like you're putting it out into the universe while you're doing your
Yeah.
tapping, and it's like a reframe as you go, and it's really hard to explain actually what
We
happens.
can demonstrate if that's easier.
We could demonstrate. Okay, let's we
We
demonstrate.
could. Okay. So there's something called the expanded breathing demonstration.
Okay.
So if you take in a big deep breath, literally the biggest, deepest breath you can
Okay.
take. And on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is, oh, hang on, I've got to think about this a second. I always have to think about this. So usually we want things to be at a 0.
Yeah.
Because 0 means no reaction at all. So there you go. So 0 would be like that breath was easy and the fullest I've ever taken, to 10 as to, that's why, restriction. Confusing myself here. So when you take that nice deep breath in, we're looking at how difficult it was to take that breath, whether that's the difficultness of taking the full breath or how full your lungs were. So just take another deep breath. And on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is like extremely difficult, how hard was it to take that deep breath?
4.
Okay. And how full, like if 10 was the maximum capacity of your lungs, so this is now going the other way.
Yeah.
How full do you feel you were at?
Say 7.
Just making notes. So capacity. Okay. And then we literally start tapping. So we'll always start with acknowledging that there's something, because EFT can work with all sorts of things. So you know the drill.
Yeah.
Even though
that
was possibly not the fullest breath I've ever taken.
That was possibly not the fullest breath I've ever taken.
I accept that that's where I'm at right now.
I accept that's where I'm at right now.
So you've had the exposure there, there's a thing, and then the acceptance of, even though I've got that thing, I'm still worthy, whole, good enough, all of those things. Even though it was a 4 in terms of ease.
It was a 4 in terms of ease.
And a 7 in terms of capacity.
And a 7 in terms of capacity.
I accept myself.
I accept myself.
And the limit my body has right now.
And the limit my body has right now.
And obviously everyone at home watching this can be doing this alongside us and experimenting. And even though it'd be nice to think I could do it better.
It would be nice to know I could do it better.
Or more easily. I accept that this is where I am right now.
I accept that this is where I am right now.
And then we go to the eyebrow. So I'll just do one hand. You can do both hands,
both.
One side of the body, both sides of the body, whatever. My breathing. Side of the eye. It felt fairly easy to take a deep breath. Under the eye. And I felt like I was almost at capacity with 7 out of 10.
And I felt like I was almost at capacity with 7 out of 10.
I wonder if there's something blocking me.
That
if I could let go might make it easier.
Would make it easier.
Collarbone, so just under the actual collarbones. Easier to take a full deep breath. And we go under the arm, so it's about where a bra strap would sit, or if you just cross your arms, it's about there. Something that might make it easier to breathe in more deeply. Top of the head. Or somehow expand my lungs further. And even though this seems really ridiculous. That tapping on my face might improve my lungs. I'm open to trying. And just see. If this might make it easier to breathe in deeply. Or even more fully. I wonder what my body might be holding on to. Or what I need to let go of. In order to breathe more deeply. And we're going to stop there. Usually we take a cleansing breath, but obviously I want you to take both. So if you take another deep breath, trying to fill your lungs to capacity. How difficult was that to do this time? Where 0's like not difficult at all, 10's hardest it's ever been.
So it's about 2.
And how full were you able to fill your lungs?
Quite deep, actually. So I was quite deep anyway, but maybe an 8.
7 before.
Maybe an 8 or 9. Yeah.
Okay. that was literally what we call 2 rounds of tapping. So we start on the side of the hand to acknowledge there's a problem. Like I say, that's the exposure therapy part, but also to accept. The biggest battle we have within ourselves is about accepting ourselves as we are right in this moment, expecting ourselves to be something different, better, more, less, whatever. So that's like the combination of the modern psychology side of it. And then starting from the eyebrow, going round to the top of the head is 1 round. So we've literally done 2 rounds there. I don't know how long it's taken us, probably less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, way less
5
than
minutes
that, yeah.
maybe. And already you've gone from a 4 to a 2 in terms of how difficult it was to breathe. So it's got easier for you, but also you were able to fill your lungs, or you felt like you could fill your lungs more. So that rating is what we call a SUDS rating, a subjective units of distress, and it's a really good way to monitor whether it's making a difference to anything. If I do a session, obviously with yourself, it was an hour-long session where it's focused on you and your individual experiences and needs. It is obviously going to be so much more powerful. So yes, there's tapping scripts. So you've got the app for the Ortners that I suggested. There's only one got them, or a guy called Brad Yates on YouTube that I would recommend, because Brad is amazing. Other people can be hit and miss, but obviously we all find what we like. But obviously the more personal you can make it to you and your experiences, the more powerful the effect is going to be. Obviously, so for me, you were talking about your experience. I think the biggest wow for me when doing EFT before qualifying to do it, I felt crummy. I've always been a bit triggered by feeling like I'm being left out of something, and something had happened. So I was like, I'm going to go tap on this. Now, I always assumed it related to being about 8 or 9 in primary school, where I had joined the netball club and they didn't bother telling me that netball wasn't happening that night. And so I was left all alone, waiting outside of school with nobody there. So as a consequence, I also hate netball and refuse point blank to play netball. But actually, when tapping, I unlocked an earlier memory of having been told off by a childminder for something I hadn't done, and being sat behind something where I could see all the other kids playing, and obviously I wasn't allowed to. And it was just like, oh my gosh. Like, firstly, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you about that memory anymore at that point. But secondly, I could see exactly how that linked to this trigger of feeling left out. And the triggers come from, like you said, the repeated experiences. So if it was just that one time, yes, there would be something in my body storing this. I don't like feeling left out. But actually, then there was the netball thing. And then there would have been something else. And then there would have been something else. And that reinforces that neural pathway and is why we get triggered. But EFT as well, it works for so many things. Like, it can work on physical pain, it can work on emotional difficulties. Obviously, it's been shown to reduce PTSD, it can reduce anxiety and depression symptoms, it can reduce overwhelm. I said pain, didn't I? It's been used to help people stop smoking, it's been used to help people with fibromyalgia, but it can also be used to improve things. So some of the research done as well was on free throws with basketball players, and I think they hit like 40%. Went away and did 15 minutes of tapping, came back, and they were 80% accuracy for just free throwing. So it can be used for goal setting and things like that as well. So it's a really, really powerful tool.
Okay.
Really powerful.
I mean, I opened up my world to this stuff about 4 or 5 years ago, where I was like, there was just something other people were doing, and people would talk about, like, you know, I'm doing the mindset stuff, and then they go deeper into what they're doing to improve their mind, or and then there's this whole woo culture thing about manifestation, which at the start I'm like complete cynic about it all. It was only when I really started to go, actually, just start putting stuff out into the universe, see what happens, and, you know, actually believe that this stuff could actually be true. And even like with EFT, I've had acupuncture in the past, and I absolutely love it. So when people say about like the acupressures and things like that, I love that kind of stuff, because I know it works. Like, because I've had it before, but I think with what I like about this, there's like a combination of things which I know I already works for me, like let's talk about this stuff, let's get it out there. But also the neuro connections is something I used to go and teach people about. So this, at that basic biology level, also works. So what I was going to say to people listening was that actually if this is something that interests you, now you've seen a session and also heard, or a small session, and you've also heard the effects that it can have on a range of different things. If you're interested in this and you'd like to explore further, Claire, if you send me all the links, which I think I've got anyway, but resend them to me, and I'll put them on all the show notes so that people can book in, or at least with a discovery call with you to begin with, just to see whether it's something they want to do.
Thank you very much.
Please reach out to Claire, because it is it has the potential to be transformational.
Yes.
Has the potential
Really
to do that.
Yeah.
Claire, thank you so much for giving us some time and sharing like two different things with us today, that journey away from school towards tutoring, but then also the EFT, which I know it's something that you're like really passionate about because of the effects it had on your own life, and you just want to be sharing that out there with others. I know it's something which I'm going to come back and do at least semi-regularly, because I need to do it, and also want to do it on my own as well, like a bit like in the meditation type style, because I think there's things that block us from moving forward. They need to be worked on, and we might not even know what they are yet. I didn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
I didn't until I started talking about this stuff.
Our subconscious is the bit running the show. And if you don't know what's in there, which we don't because it's subconsciousness, then but it's a way to unlock all of that.
So thank you so much. And I know that everyone's going to get so much from listening to this. And would have to, I always say this to guests who, I mean, we've been chatting for quite a long time, but have a lot to offer. There's a part 2 in here somewhere. So we'll save that for later. And I know that we'll stay in contact anyway, and we'll find the right time and the right subject and the right topic to talk about in the future.
Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
Amazing.